This is a special presentation from the Brighton Central School District Board of Education.
Really quick for our community, quick updates, tell you where we're at. Last Tuesday, we presented a preliminary budget proposal to the board that will be finalized, at least in every way that we can finalize it, this coming Tuesday, the 23rd. Key points to it: it does not cut programs, it adds full-day kindergarten, and it stays under the cap. And the way we're able to do that at this point is leveraging some of our longer-term financing strategies. So for example, full-day kindergarten conversion aid, using that differently than we had planned to, using some reserves over a period of time, knowing that we can do that responsibly, fairly, reasonably, practically. Also, though, the good news that is evolving for us right now is that it does appear as though there will be more state aid than what we had originally budgeted. So in other words, we may not need to use some of those longer term financing strategies. Senator Cooney and Assemblymember Clark have been instrumental in pushing the Assembly and the Senate to offer one House proposals that right now looks like our aid would increase to a minimum of 60% of the foundation aid due. Now, that doesn't solve our problem, but it sure helps, right? The governor's proposal was 49.5%, and an increase to a floor of 60% would mean $1.6 million more to the district. That's over 3% on the levy in total if it was all to go that direction. So that's a pretty dramatic change for us. It'll be very, very helpful. That'll cause an entirely different conversation once the state budget is solved and we can count on that money. Right now, that's still in the negotiation phase with the governor's office. And the reality is relief funding will come in the form of from the COVID bill from the federal government. We don't know yet the amounts. We also don't know the requirements, and we'll take a careful look at that. We don't know what the state might take from that to supplant their share of aid. We're hoping nothing, but we'll have to determine how to use that over time specific to COVID expenses and the types of ways we would like to rebound. So in other words, looking at technology solutions, learning loss, perhaps additional counseling supports, whatever it is that we determine our needs coming back from the pandemic that this relief bill could support. We'll take a careful look at those as we know more, which we know very little. Matter of fact, right now, you know everything we know. The process for us in terms of budgeting and what we do, kind of broken down simplistically. We review, we plan, we prepare, we scrub our numbers, right? That happens all through the summer and fall. Take a look at what's working, what's not working, what we're spending money on, what we can do more efficiently, how we can save money, where we'd like to be devoting resources over time. We scrub the numbers to see where potentially we have budget lines that we're not spending as much. So how can we make adjustments going into the next year? And we begin to communicate exactly what we're looking at going into the next budget year. In January, the governor makes a proposal. We review that. We ask the community for input. How do you feel about that? What do you see? We did that in terms of the thought exchange that I'll share today. We advocate, we plan, we review, we talk to legislators, we adjust our plans based on that. We ask for more input in forums like this and get feedback that way. The first forum held a couple of weeks ago, we got a lot of good information from people, a lot of great discussion that happened in small groups. We react. We discuss further what is in the budget proposal, and then we refine our plans. And when I say we react, it depends on what is being presented by the Assembly and the Senate. That's what we're doing right now. We share again, we continue to ask for input. Outside of just the budget forums, people can always share input with us at every single board meeting. There's an opportunity for public comment that is always available, as are all of us open to feedback all the time. If you care to share with any board member or administrator, our ears and eyes are always open. And the Assembly and the Senate, as I mentioned, make their proposal, and eventually an agreement is reached with the governor, and we finalize our proposal then for voters to consider. So our proposal, our executive proposal we make even on the 23rd, will likely be adjusted based on the finalized state budget, which is supposed to happen each year by April 1st. In terms of what we think we know right now, what exactly is happening, the governor has proposed a budget that concerns us in two very significant ways. The first is that the aid that he's proposed is not nearly enough, right? We do know that. The second item is that he has proposed changing the way reimbursable aids are administered. So for us, that's transportation aid, capital building project aid, collapsing all of that into one category that will be administered through a formula similar to how foundation aid is administered. And we know that that's highly political and can get manipulated each year. So we're hopeful those things won't happen. Both the Assembly and the Senate have proposed have budget proposals that do not include that change, and that is good for everybody. Again, we know that aid will be a challenge, but it will likely be better than his proposal. We have been prudent over time and responsible. Those rainy day funds available, so to speak, in the reserves are available, and it is pouring. But we can be thoughtful about that. We just have to be very careful over time to be able to replenish that source of revenue. So the example we've used often is if you're going to pay your mortgage out of your savings account, you need to know that money is coming at some point to replenish that, because the mortgage will still come due. And if you don't have a sustaining source of revenue, income coming to you, in other words, salary, for example, in the household example, that can support that expense, either you better have some kind of settlement, some income source that's coming to you to pay for that. So we want to make sure that as we're drawing down from those savings, we know that there will be revenue to eventually replenish that, or we'll be able to change our spending in some way to match the revenue that we have. Full day kindergarten was promised, and it is a priority. It remains a priority, and that's why we've proposed it. We also know that our community does not want to exceed the cap. We understand that. We don't either. And we hear that message loud and clear. We do not want to reduce services, nor does the community, made very, very clear also in the thought exchange and a lot of the feedback that we get from people. We need to do everything we can to have students in school 5 days per week. And we are in that process now. Many of you know that. You're involved in that. You're answering questions on that. We've communicated very clearly on that. If not now, certainly for September. We haven't given up on the now. Still working towards an April 12th or 19th, more likely 19th, a fourth quarter return. But a lot has to happen between now and then. There's a long runway to that, but we are committed to being prepared for that if it becomes a possibility. And we know there's a need for stability and predictability. There's safety found in that predictability. In this current environment where so much is unknown, people just simply want to know, where are we heading? And we'd like to be able to provide that information to them as quickly as we can and provide security in that answer. When we went and analyzed the thought exchange feedback given to us, and we'll go through that specifically, the significant themes, just to repeat them again, that came up: do not cut, reopen schools, full day should be implemented, do not exceed the cap, and fight for aid, keep advocating. So before, when I mentioned the 60%, when I mentioned that the governor's proposal wasn't enough, but when I also mentioned that we wouldn't have cuts, I want to make sure people don't feel as though somehow that the air has come out of the balloon in terms of the fight for that money. That is still money the district desperately needs. When I'm talking about longer term financing strategies, it depends on getting that money. So that is a big part of the conversation that we continue to have. I'm joining Senator Cooney this Sunday at 1 o'clock for a webinar, a discussion, a panel discussion about state aid. I know Supervisor Malley's involved in that as well. This continues to be a fight. We very much thank our representatives in Albany, again, Senator Cooney and Assemblymember Clark, and also fight for Brighton and all of the people in our community that continue to advocate on our behalf in this regard. So a summary of the exchange, what else that we found out? This is the question we asked, essentially: what should be prioritized? What should we be thinking about? What else is on your mind relative to the budget? 366 people participated. That's usually the range of what we have. Anywhere from 350 to 400 people usually participate in the exchange. 187 of those people added their own specific thoughts. And where did that break down? 64% were parent or caregivers, and 25% staff members. Community members that would have termed themselves without kids in school, just 7%, and 4% were some other type of relationship to the district. Pretty spread evenly across the levels, probably the smallest number of people from the French Road area. But what my suspicion is, when you take a look at the age that people usually have their children, where they're spread out, we did have an option for people to indicate multiple, and there probably are more people with kids at French Road that are in multiple buildings than the way it works in the other buildings. So I wonder if that number is just impacted by that as well, but pretty even representation across the district. Just the word cloud, what were the words that came up most often? Obviously, foundation aid is a big issue for us. Class sizes, keeping them small, in-person instruction being very, very important. The social emotional impacts of where we are, get the kids back to school was a big part of this exchange too. Some of the top thoughts, I won't read all of these at you. This material is all posted on the web as well, but keep fighting for foundation aid. Don't cut teachers, time to cut administrators. That is one that is easy to come up with, comes up often with people. Interesting, when we break down the thoughts and we can categorize them by who rated things where, that comes up as an outside, not an internal, in the district staff preference either, even among our teaching staff. If we've learned anything over this past year, it's hard. It is that kids need sports and the arts or whatever extracurricular they're involved with. Keep kids engaged. Again, 5 days of instruction, really important. Keep class sizes as small as possible. Foundation aid flat, again, you've got to advocate for that. get kids back to school full time, and anything less than our fair foundation aid is just simply not acceptable, and we couldn't agree more. Now, here are the bottom thoughts, and this is interesting because I want people to recognize we look at every single thought. Every single thought is important. It may not rate based on community feedback as high, but to us, it still was an individual's thought, and it is just as important. It just tells us how everybody feels about the thought. It doesn't mean that it's any less important in terms of the community feedback and recognizing that somebody feels that way. Not everybody may agree to that. It's still their thought. So we do look at those too. More remote student in-person options needed, full day kindergarten, K-5 full-time, middle high school hybrid. We should not have to pay for wraparound programming. Our kids are full day K. Due to tax burden, Brighton is not livable now. Brookside neighborhood entrance needs to be blocked. Full-time kindergarten. We actually like hybrid. By the way, I think many of the full-time kindergarten, when they ranked lower, it was because people had different perceptions. They weren't downplaying the need for full day kindergarten. It's usually the second part of the thought maybe that people keyed in on. We actually like hybrid, less time spent on wasted junk. However, many don't, so please be aware of both. Our community's kids aren't behind academically. We completely agree, as a matter of fact, with that. We decide as a town, state, nation what is behind. We all are living in a pandemic and suffering its emotional effect. Behind is arbitrary. I know this will not be a popular thought, but we enjoyed the hybrid model. BHS gym needs updates. Paint on the floor or Barron's looks awful. Changing mascot costs money and should have been calculated. And actually, it doesn't. Our uniforms are all over the time have just said Brighton, not said Barron's. Just want to make sure we clarify that. And some of those very minor cosmetic changes for us, because Barron's was not actually listed very many places, will be taken care of as part of our regular maintenance budget. More remote student in-person options needed as well, somebody mentioned. So again, the update was that we did these three big things in a preliminary budget proposal: stay under the cap, adding full day kindergarten, and not cutting program. We likely will get more state aid. Right now, it looks like 60% might be a number that they're honing in on. Lots of negotiation with the governor to happen between now and then. And COVID relief funding is something we need to be aware of over time and how that could help us right now. So for those that are worried about learning loss, we're considering not necessarily learning loss, but what do we need to do to make sure that we're preparing kids as best as possible as we transition back either now, over the summer, or into next school year, and thinking about the mental health needs in particular, scaffolding support and additional programs as we go into next year with that very limited use and limited time source of revenue. That leaves us at kind of this summary, what we're hoping for from, I should say, today. We just want to lend more voice to what's been shared. So the exchange is one thing, but this is an opportunity for you just to talk to us person to person and say, you know, I didn't really see it the same way, or this is what that person may have meant. Have you thought about it this way? We're essentially saying, please tell us more. What are your thoughts on the thoughts? Are we on the right track? And do you have other suggestions? So when we do go into breakouts, if we do, and I just want to take a look at people here, how many people are here, for example. Yeah, you know, we'll break it up into two groups for a quick conversation. I'd like you to think about those things, and I'll throw those into the chat as well. Tell us more. What are your thoughts about the thoughts? Are we on the right track? And do you have other suggestions? So before we jump into that, I would like to stop sharing the screen here and just ask first, Karen, are there Facebook comments, suggestions, anything to share with the group?
We've got about 11 people watching, but we don't have any comments so far.
Okay. And Debbie, what about in the chat?
Nope, nothing in the chat.
Okay. So what we're going to do now is one, just stop the live stream so that we don't have dead air there on Facebook and the groups can go in and just speak to each other. But this is there for people to be able to take a look at it another time on Facebook. And we thank anybody who was on Facebook for joining and encourage them to reach out to us if there's more that they would like to add or in any other way participate in this process.
This has been a special presentation from the Brighton Central School District.